is a continuity between then and the now. The essayist Edward Hoagland has written that nature predates thought. And this is very much at the essence of what I've learned about the St. John's, beyond all the hydrological studies, beyond all the inventories of the biota of the river, that if we're fully going to appreciate this place for what it's about, we have to allow ourselves the opportunity to be in that place and to have a visceral connection with it. We can go out to the river and we can see Bartram's drawing of the passion flower, again, wonderfully detailed, the spirit of the flower. Can a flower have spirit and verve? I think that it can, at least in that case. We can go out today and we can see the passion flower still growing in the basin of the St. John's. Despite all we've lost, there are still these wonderful relics that are left for us, and we can still have a relationship with these places, with these plants, with these animals. And here we have the famous alligator, el lagarto, as the Spanish called him, the lizard. And here's Bartram's rendering of them in Battle Lagoon, which we find out today is in the Lake Woodruff National Wildlife Refuge on Idlewild Point near Lake Dexter. You're unlikely to see alligators like that if you go there today because they won't be blowing smoke out of their nostrils. But you will see them in the water. They're out there now, they're mating. We were on the Riverkeeper cruise the other day, and we saw a lot of gators along the shore, and they were preparing to make new gator families. So they were actively trying to become the best gators they could be. Here's a 1938 map of the Ocala National Forest. Matches fiction with reality. A couple of years ago, I co-produced and wrote a script for a film for PBS called In Marjorie's Wake, rediscovering Rollins, a river in time. And that film was designed to retrace the journey that Marjorie Kinnan Rollins and her neighbor, Desi Smith, made on the St. John's River back in 1938. Rollins wrote about it in a chapter of Cross Creek entitled Hyacinth Drift. 1940s, I believe 1947, 1948, the black and white version, the first version of The Yearling, her Pulitzer-winning novel, was filmed here in Florida. And the filmmakers from Warner Brothers from California, when they came to Florida, they went to Mrs. Rollins and they said, can you tell us the places that you write about in your fiction that are real? And she says, well, they're all real, and let me show you. And on the right, you can see handwriting, and that's her handwriting, where she points out that Baxter's Island, where the Baxters, Jody Baxter and his Ma and Pa lived, is really Pat's Island. Pat's Island, which exists in the Ocala National Forest. Forrester's Island is Hughes Island. Jody's spring, where he built his little flutter mill, is really a Silver Glen spring. It was a treat for me to see this map, too, I have to tell you. We were researching the film. I was in the Smathers Archives, the library at University of Florida, and this was a map that wasn't even listed as part of of all the artifacts that she left, everything that she left at the University of Florida. This wasn't included in the inventory. So when it was brought out in a box, and I began to look through the box, I mean, I was stunned. It was as if you could enter a person's mind, the mind of a writer who lived here and who visited people and who tried to understand why these people were so influenced by place. And there's a sort of a cognitive leap that goes on between inspiration and reality. And I came as close to understanding and feeling that leap, I believe, when I pulled that map out as I ever have. And here we go. Rollins herself at Salt Spring, gigging a crab, perhaps to make some crab Newburgh back in Cross Creek. And she got to know places. She not only described places really well, as I mentioned earlier, but she listens very carefully to the stories that she was told by people who lived here. And on the right, we have the rendering of Jody with his little flutter mill there at what today you'll see labeled as Boyle Spring, right behind Silver Glen, part of the Silver Glen River system itself. We have nonfiction weaving facts into chronicles of the Grand and Noble San Juan. That was actually the only book that had been written at the time when I began to research River of Lakes, St. John's, A Parade of Diversity, written back in the 1940s. It was a great book written in this wonderful Baroque style of the time, but it was a rendering of human history. There was very little natural history in the book itself. So in trying to address the river, again, going back to the need for pulling parts together, I tried to understand the natural systems and tried to bring them together in a larger story that began and ended out here on the river system. Something we should be concerned about and something we were warned about quite a while ago, and this very much is relevant to what's going on now with the taking of water, surface water, from the St. John system. John Kunkel Small, a botanist from New York Botanical Gardens, traveled to Florida in the early 20th century, 1910, 1920, 1930. He became very disturbed by the fact that many of the subtropic hammocks and tropical hammocks that he went to view and to sketch and to collect orchids, which he studied, were disappearing at a very rapid rate. He wrote a book called Eden to Sahara, and in that book, published in 1928, he said, if you continue to treat your state this way, to drain off your water from these swamps, from the wetlands, if you continue to manipulate your landscape to make it drier simply to accommodate prosperity, you will be left with a state that doesn't resemble the true nature of what Florida is really about. And because it's on the latitude of all the great deserts of the world, you will be left with a desert if this happens. That was written it was published in 1929, but he wrote it in 1928, a visionary. We can use film to help people understand that today. This is a film we did not long after I wrote River of Lakes about the Wekiva River, and this is Rock Springs, which is one of the major, two major springs that feed the Wekiva River. Getting ready to do some underwater stuff, and here on the right is the cameraman that's back inside of that cavern itself, and he's inside of a cave that was created by water flow over thousands and thousands of years. You can see it's dry, only his feet are in the water. The water level has dropped in that cave just as it's dropping in many of our major springs. We're losing our magnitude. But in addition to having the infusion of nitrates, we're losing magnitude, we're simply running out of water. Working on a film that also helps re-story the landscape, that helps re-envision, in the hope that if we have a whole vision, we might be able to make more complete and whole decisions that might have to do with sustainability. This is Puzzle Lake, and we talked about Puzzle Lake earlier because Margaret Kennedy Rollins went through it on her trip there. This is a shot I took of a friend of mine, Michelle Thatcher, who paddled the entire St. Johns River system by herself. And the film that we've scripted and that's moving in production now is called The Alligator Princess of America's Nile. America's Nile being the way that the St. John's was sold to tourists back in the 19th century and the early 20th century, because it's subtropical, it flows from south to north. And here she's faced with the options on Puzzle Lake, in a place where there is no dredged channel, in a place where the natural channels change all the time, and it does very little good to try to go through there and think that you're going to find your way in and out in a short period of time. We have a national PBS release. There's Marjorie's Wake. A local musician and educator, Jennifer Chase, has actually created a CD of music about the film itself, and there's the cover for the DVD. Marjorie's Wake.